Well, good evening, church, and welcome to another one of our Focus Fridays. It's always good to have you with us. Tonight, I actually want to talk about a pretty big topic, but it's the area of anxiety, especially in children and in youth. So during this time, with all its pressures and stresses and even just the close proximity of people just being inside. I know now with the nice weather, people are starting to be outside a little more, but I know it's been quite the challenge for some families to just be in this close proximity more than they typically are. And what this time has done in a lot of families is that it's brought up a lot of just different reactions and responses. And all it takes really is for one person in a household to feel a little stressed. And if you know what I'm saying, it easily affects everyone else in the household. And so there's been, as I've talked to a lot of people, I know that there's been a lot of emotions, a lot of things that have surfaced and come out during this time. For all its intents and purposes, it's just the way that it is in this season. But as parents, you always see that children really senses things. And so if there's one person in your household that is going through something or dealing with something or maybe feeling stressed or anxious, as a parent, you know that kids pick up on things, whether you want them to or not. And depending on what they're sensing, that can be a great thing or that can be a thing that's not so great. And so the extra pressures that are put on individuals and families right now, I think, is bringing out both the best in people and sometimes it's bringing out the worst. And so sometimes we're pleased with what surfaces in these times, and when we're happy to see that maybe there is an inner strength and that God is at work in us and bringing us through this season. But other times we're surprised at what surfaces and we're not happy with what we're seeing and we don't like it. But I want to tell you, church, tonight, that I actually believe that it's a good thing, because when something surfaces and something comes out, it actually gives us the ability to deal with it. It's actually much worse if things just linger beneath the surface, because then you don't have the ability to actually address it and then deal with it. And so what has surfaced for a lot of people during this time, especially for children and youth, is this idea of different forms of anxiety or stress. And they take many different expressions like fear or frustration, sometimes just stress in itself, or maybe even outbursts or sadness or even lack of motivation or anger. Those are just different symptoms of what's going on inside of a person. And it can be occasional, or perhaps you've seen during this time that those tendencies and those kind of behaviors maybe have become more common than what you'd like them to be. But the reality is that many times anxiety or stress or those kind of things can be a good indicator to know that there's something that we need to address and something that we need to deal with. So anxiety is not always a bad thing, because it can indicate that it's time to address something. But the reality is that anxiety is not a good place to camp. It's not a place where you want to stay. It's not a place where you want to dwell, if you want to say it that way. So if you can imagine a scale, everyone peaks a little bit at some point into stress or anxiety. Those are emotions that God has put within us because they help us indicate something that's coming. Imagine for a moment a scale with me. The reality is that everyone peaks into those moments every now and then where we feel these feelings rise up, whether it's stress or anxiety or something like that. And it's okay to peek in there, because it indicates, again, that there's something you can deal with, something that you need to adjust and learn to handle. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to have your child, your youth, or even yourself live in that place of anxiety where you're peaking all the time, because as we know, that can cause a lot of things in a person's being, in a person's body, and in their life. And so what I want to do tonight is simply just give you a couple of thoughts around this and how we can effectively, in a biblical manner, try to help our children and youth work through these feelings. And because we're living under circumstances that are exceptionally unusual right now, I think it's important to understand that there's probably a lot more need right now for this idea of empathy in helping especially children and youth deal with these feelings that are coming up, and being empathetic towards them and helping them see that it's okay to have those emotions. And like Zoe had said a couple of weeks ago, we need to not deny that they're there, but we actually need to bring them before God so that we can help deal with them in a healthy manner. But I want to encourage you, parents especially, to not stay in what I would call an emergency response mode and just approach it as if you're trying to help your kids just get through this season. Rather, I encourage you as parents to take this season with all of what's in it and use it as a learning tool, a teaching tool rather, for your children to develop healthy life skills that can give them tools to actually deal with these kind of feelings and thoughts for the rest of their lives. And so instead of staying in that place of kind of responding to an emergency thing where it's a quick fix answer, take this again as a moment to teach some good life skills that are going to be healthy for them that they can use long into their adulthood. So the reality is that anxiety is a very complex concept. And so it doesn't just have a quick fix answer. I'm not here to give you one. But if you look at the core of everything, I want to mention three things quickly. I want to mention the behaviors that we see. Those are simply the outward expressions of what's going on the inside. But then there's also the heart, and the heart really is the seed of our emotions and where we process our feelings. But then we also have the mind, and that is the place where we process our thoughts. And so when we talk about a subject like anxiety, in order to deal with it, we need to see that we have to actually have a very holistic approach to it, because we can't simply just deal with the outward behavior, or we can't just try to adjust our thoughts or simply just address the feeling itself, but rather we need to recognize that all those three components, as well as many other things, are connected. And that when you parent your children through something like anxiety, it takes a lot of prayer, it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of wisdom. So we need to also recognize that there's different approaches and different methods. And on top of that, every child, of course, is unique and different, and you may need to have a different approach with every child within your own household. And so in times like this, sometimes we need to apply something at first called what I would call the first aid approach, where you simply look for an instant solution to help with a very current situation. So for example, when a paramedic arrives at a scene of an accident, he may need to apply first aid and go into emergency response mode where he ties something around a bleeding leg or something like that. But that's not the long-term solution. That's just the instant thing in order to get control of the situation. So for us as parents, there are times during this season and during regular just seasons too, where we may need to use some of these first aid approaches or solutions like de-escalating a situation or quick fix strategies, as I call them, sometimes like distracting or empathy or redirection. But again, those are not actually going to deal with the long-term problem. So in order to really address anxiety, we need to recognize the cause of it and the root of it so that we can actually then find those long-term solutions. So I want to say again, it's absolutely impossible to cover such solutions in a few minutes, but I wanted to take this time to encourage you to say that the Bible does have a lot to say about this subject, and there's a lot of answers in the Bible if you're willing to go searching and looking for them. But again, as with everything else in our faith journey, we can't make a withdrawal of the promises or the benefits or of the principles of God unless we actually then apply those godly principles in our lives. We have to first do the input into those things and seek out the answers in order to see that investment return and be able to draw that out. So again, the long-term solutions may look very different for everyone depending on the age and temperament of your child, as well as their circumstance, the setting, the family dynamics, all those kind of things. And other things, very basic things like routine, diet, medical conditions, or family circumstances can, of course, affect a child and their anxiety level. So I'm not even going to attempt to say that I have easy answers for you tonight, but I want to encourage you that there are solutions. And I want to encourage you as a family to not just ride this season out, but instead go on a journey with your child or with your youth and work with them. And I encourage you to engage in conversation with your child, with your family about this very topic, if that's something that's surfacing in your home. I've also realized that it's much more effective when addressing parenting in general or something like anxiety to do more training and less correcting, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is that it's always better to try to find moments of non-conflict where you can actually train your child in healthy thought patterns, train your child in healthy reactions and responses rather than go into high-stress moments and try to correct them. And that goes for any parenting for that matter. And I would encourage you to use more strategy and less reaction because, again, those are going to be healthier for a long-term solution. So I want to encourage you again to recognize that there are always underlying things behind every behavior that we see. So through this time, as parents, I encourage you to listen to your child, but don't just listen to them. Really hear what it is that they're saying and invest that time into them because so much can start to come out if you give them the time to actually express what's going on inside. The reality is that parenting is a work of the heart. It's not just about behavior modification, but it's the long-term work of teaching your child to reflect God in their heart and in their character. So by teaching your child about God, about his character, and about how he can empower us through the Holy Spirit in every situation that we face, and by finding practical biblical examples and principles and helping them understand that God knows them and he cares for them about what they're thinking and about what they're feeling, it can help you to start that journey to help them deal with their fears and anxieties that they may be experiencing right now. And you can help them then equip them with tools that they can use in their lives. So because this is such an important subject, I'm not going to actually go on about it, but I want to give you an excellent resource that I came across. It's a webinar by a man. His name is Dr. Scott Turansky. He did a webinar called Anxiety in Children and Youth. It is jam-packed with some incredible biblically based, but also very practical information. You'll see a link to it in this email that the video came along with, and so I encourage you to check it out, to listen to what he has to say. There's a lot of nuggets in there that can help you on this journey as you walk through this season. I also want to promote a book that he wrote. He's written about 30 books on parenting. They're absolutely excellent. But if you want a good parenting resource for how to parent your child to reflect a Christian worldview, I encourage you to check out this book. You'll see it here, but it's called Parenting is Heart Work, again, written by Dr. Scott Turansky and a co-author, but it's an excellent resource for everybody. Even if you don't have kids, I would encourage you to read it. And again, check out that webinar. It'll give you great tools to work with on this journey. Thank you guys for checking in and have a great rest of your night.